showing you his wrath. Now, did they get to see some of his wrath in Egypt? Yes, but was it ever pointed in their direction? Not once. And now he's going, do you want to see what the other side looks like? Okay. Because what? Because they're the ones that are spurring this on. So, we keep going. Then what happens? Come on, this is participation time, guys. Come on. Do what? I can hear you barely.
Tells them God not to accept the grain offering.
Right? Okay. So now he's talking on whose behalf? Now he's talking on God's behalf. He's now saying, I'm not directing you, God, but you know what? If you make this a little tough on them, I think they'll turn their act around. Right? I mean, do you think that's Moses' intention? I don't think until that he makes that final statement of, unless you die in the way that it's undeniable. I don't think that's the first, I think that's the point where Moses gets pushed to. I don't think he's there yet. I think right now he's going, let's make it tough. Let's make it tough. All right, when you're getting tough on your kids, okay? Think about that. When you're getting tough on your kids, do you tell them how stupid they are?
You shouldn't.
Or you shouldn't. Biblically, you don't tell them how stupid they are. You don't tell them how disappointed you are. What you do is you show them what they should do. Or you show them this is not fun that other way. Right? Isn't that what discipline is? Isn't that what discipline is? Discipline is showing them that right now you're not only not getting rewarded, you're having a little bit of pain to associate with this wrong action. Right? That's what SWATs are. Guys, understand, if your parents spank you, that was why. They wanted that association of pain to a bad decision. That's what it is. I got lots of spankings. I did. So I know the pain of those bad decisions. But you know, it does come down to, is there a point that you actually have to let them fall?
Yes.
Right. Is that easy for a parent to do? Do you want to see them go through that much pain? No. That's why we spank them. And yes, it hurts, and we cringe every time we do it. I'm just, look at the aspect of this, okay?
It's also for the other sibling to learn as well to look at that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're getting to that point right next, but you're right, okay? Because Randy Kate, okay, she's not even in here so I can talk about it. She did not get one SWAT from her parents. Do you know why? Her older brother did. Her older brother did, and so she knew, well, that look means bad things. She's actually told me, my brother-in-law, you got to understand this. I'm not a big guy. My brother-in-law's a big guy. He's 6'4", and I met him like 2 months out of the Navy for 6 years. 6'4", 265 pounds, and about 3% body fat. He was deathly scared of his mama's fly swatter. He knew what that meant. He knew what that meant. I mean, seriously, I thought she was joking. Oh, yeah. And then he did something smart, Alecky, and pushed LaVon's button. She pulled down that fly swatter. That man ran through the house. Okay? A 27-year-old man at the time ran from his mother. And he wasn't laughing. He knew what was coming. The pain associated with the bad decision. So this is where I'm going with this. This is what I'm seeing from this, is that there's this pain. And Moses is going, okay, God, don't accept their offering. Let them see what it's like to be on the outside. And then what happened?
And that took us census.
Okay, keep going.
Their sensors.
And Aaron's rod buddy. So they knew who the true priests were.
Speak up,
Huh?
louder.
They put incense in their censers.
Right. Okay, they put incenses in their censers. Now, how bad of a decision was that? Well, it's not only just a bad decision, it's now to the point where God does something new. Get the gravity of that. Okay, think of this as a kid. You've seen your parents mad, but you saw them that one time go ballistic red. You never wanted to see that again, right? I mean, think about it. Has anybody in here besides me experienced that point where the throbbing is even stopped? Now you can't see anything but red. There's no face anymore. It's all just a red blur. Has anybody gotten to that point with their parents? I got to that point with my dad. It was not something I ever wanted to do again. I called my mom a bad word. Oh, it was not good. I thought the slap hurt. Then my dad found out. It's because I did something that it was not only wrong, it was abominable. Does that make sense? Men, your wife gets called a name, it doesn't just boil your blood. I was talking with somebody the other day about anger. I was like, you know what? God also gave us anger. And in those instances, there's a reason. And I found out that day who the most important person in my dad's life was. And it wasn't me. Does that make sense? My kids know that they're not the most important. She is. It's because you step over that line, and that's what they did. They took incense and put it in their censers. Was that acceptable?
No.
What happened to the first two that did that?
They
They died on the spot.
They were the sons of Aaron.
And they were the sons of Aaron. They were in line for this headship anyway. And they still fried on the spot. Now a group of men decides to do it, and they're like that second and third cousin removed at this point. Okay? And they did the abominable thing, and they decided to, you know what? We know this was bad. We know that Nadab and Abihu, they screwed up, but that was them. This is us. You ever get that hot? You ever get that big-headed? I did. Then I got a ticket. I'm bigger than these laws. I'm bigger than this 75 mile an hour. And then you get a ticket, and you realize you're not. It's the same thing that happens here. Except that God does something else. He opens the earth. I mean, read this description. Does this sound like a really moving event? I mean, this is something that I imagine there were nightmares about afterwards. I would have nightmares about it if I saw this. You ever seen a bad car wreck that you had a nightmare about? A bad event that you had a nightmare about? I'm sure this happened to a lot of people. So, and it came to pass, as he had made the end of speaking all these words, and the ground clave asunder that was under them. So it's not an earthquake. It's something new. Sinkhole, right? Except that it closed up. Sinkholes don't close up. And the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed them and their houses and all the men that pertained unto Korah and all their goods. So God didn't just say, okay, we're going to get rid of these guys we're going to get rid of everything that ever had them associated with it. Right? You ever want to blot things out of your memory?
I do.
Is that what you call being cut off?
I say that's called being blot out of the book. Because we know that what happens, we know this in Revelation, we know that in Matthew it talks about it. What happens with the book? Do we want our names to be in the book or be blotted out? Put it in the book. Do you think there's a difference between being in the book and being blotted out of the book?
Oh, yes.
I think there's a big difference. Because that means you had to be in the book first. And these guys were. Yes, sir.
Do you think this will be repeated? Is this the same? Do you think this is close to the same thing that happens at Armageddon?
They and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. What this makes me think of is a little parable. A little parable you should like to describe about some wheat and some things in the wheat. Mhm.
Tares, right?
And what happens to those tares?
Okay.
They're taken out, bound, and cast into the pit. There's a lot of that in this.
Yeah, it's even in the book of Revelation.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. And yet we're getting this in number 16. And who is this dealing with? Is this dealing with someone who actually has an idea of who God is?
Oh, yes.
Northites carry the pieces from inside the tabernacle.
These guys have, right, these guys have not, that don't only have an understanding of him, they get to do his service.
Well, that's in 3. That's exactly, you've gone far enough. For all the congregation are holy.
Right.
Every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord?
Has anybody ever heard that in today's church?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm maybe
we're all
stepping on
priests.
toes here,
We're all
but
priests and kings.
that's a message we get every day. That it's given every
To
day.
rule and reign.
So, all right. Now, we're going to move a little bit faster now, but I just wanted to make the real emphasis of what's going on here. And what did this stem from?
Rebellion.
The mouth. It stemmed from the mouth.
Mouth, yeah.
Because we all have things that we feel. Do we all open our trap and tell people about it? No. Gabriel, no. Don't. No, we don't want to do that always. Now, should we have more of a hold on our mind? Yes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not giving an excuse for your mind to run rampant and do all that kind of stuff in your head. I'm just making the statement, though, that if you're dumb enough to have those kind of thoughts, you don't want to put them out in the world. Okay? So, then what happens? Now they're dead. Who comes to Moses next? And how long from the time that the earth swallowed them up is it? The next day. Anybody in here have a longer memory than one day? You would hope, right? You would hope. But
If they dreamed about it, they forgot about it by breakfast.
Right, exactly. I mean, the kids, because it doesn't say this happened in a remote village out in Africa somewhere. This said that this happened in front of the entire congregation. This said that everyone was around. They all got to see it. So guess what? The kids were there.
How many Israelites? I mean, what's the ideal kind of, was it 1,000, 100,000, or?
Well, how many got swallowed up?
Well, as far as
14,700.
the congregation itself, how many Israelites were there?
Bunch. Couple million in that neighborhood. We know that the ones that left Egypt was 600,000 men.
Of
Of fighting
20
age.
to 50.
From 20 to 50. Do you think there were any 52-year-olds? Probably. Do you think there were any 19-year-olds? You better hope. You know what I mean? There was a lot more people than just 600,000, but we know that there were 600,000 fighting men of age. And then we also know that a mass multitude went with them. Now, let's keep going. Kids have watched this. Anybody ever seen a scary movie and it just, that night, you just dreamt about it? I watched it when I was 6, and I had nightmares for 3 weeks. And now it's the stupidest movie in the world. I mean, you watch it and you go, I was scared of this?
It's scary.
But, yeah, I still, you know what though? Every time I take a shower, I still look at that drain. It's just how it is.
Don't tell us.
So, I look at the drain, man. I'm just saying. But I'm making the point here though, that these kids have watched this. These kids have watched this. This was a horrific event. Because what happened first? The first thing that happens is Earth swallows up Korah, right?
Yep.
Then what happens?
Screaming and crying, everyone's blaming.
Fire comes shooting from God. So they think, well, Nadab and Abihu thing didn't happen. Woo, look at our censers. We got incense in them. And then God went, here you go. Boom, they get fried. 250 of them. Of which ones? The men of renown. The one that churned. Okay? Right? So it's the very next day. Very next day, everyone goes, but on the morrow, all the congregation of Israel. And it says, all. It's not italicized. It's in my book. And it says, all the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, saying, you have killed the people of the Lord. Then God doesn't even wait. He didn't even wait. He decided they want to see power, I'll show them power. They should have known this. They've already seen the 10 plagues in Egypt. They've already seen the miracle of manna and water from a rock. They've already seen me take care of Amalek, disconfigure him. They've seen these things happen. They ought to know my power. They've heard my voice. They ought to know my power. But they still don't get it? Okay. This is the point where I'm going, though, that can you see once saved, always saved in this translation? In this story? I know I'm bringing up a couple of different hot topics or ones that are controversial we don't need to talk about. Except that the fact that right here we're seeing these men of renown, these men of God that are not only getting destroyed, but it's not pretty. Because they decided to screw up. They decided to murmur. They decided to incite. They decided to incite a riot. And God went, okay, here you go.
And that proves Proverbs 6, where the 6 things are, detestable, but one's abominable.
Right. Yep. So.
They decided what God had given them wasn't enough.
Right. Because he's, just the provider of all. We take for granted what we've been given. And so they decided they were going to take for granted the fact that they just seen these people die because of an incitement against God and Moses. How many had to pay the price this time?
14,000.
Over 14,000 people. And that's in the span of Moses telling Aaron, run and grab your staff. 14,000 people die in the span of him going from point A to point B. And we know that he was a Levite, right? We know Aaron was a Levite. How far away do you think he was from the tent of meeting? Not very. And it took from point A to point B, 14,000 people died. Who created this mess?
The people.
The people did, right?
Rebellious.
The rebellious people. Their words created this.
What you under now, be God.
That's right. Like I said, you either create or you destroy. They created this. Think about it. We're told here that God does something new. They incited such a reaction from our Creator that it's new. Do we know, and how many times have you heard the verse, there's nothing new under the sun? This was before that verse.
Now under the sun.
Now there's nothing that hasn't.
Maybe that's just wishful thinking. Well, I hope that there won't be anything new.
I hope that this won't ever happen again. But once it's created, guess what? That means it can happen again. Yes, ma'am.
It's interesting to me in Aaron, in order to stop the plague, the priest has to stand between the living and the dead. He's protecting the living by standing in front of them to keep the death from coming.
Right.
As priests, we have the same obligation within the body to stand between the living and the dead. And yet, I don't think any of us ever realize that.
Right. No, it's very true. I mean, we know that there's this conveyor belt. I mean, y'all have heard Alan talk about the conveyor belt to hell. People are riding on it all day long.
No.
Yeah. He talks about the conveyor belt to hell. Okay? And the conveyor belt to hell is constantly throwing people off. Constantly. Right and left. Right down into the pit. The end is the pit. Okay? There's only one way off of that. But it's not done by them, it's done by us. We've got to stand in their way to show them who He is. They have to accept it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not putting that on us. But I am making that suggestion that we have to tell them there's only one way off this thing. His name is Yeshua. And He has a little book.
We also have to be on guard for the living, so that if death is coming toward us, we can stop and
Sure.
say, look, you're not coming any closer to this body.
Right. Absolutely. You know, I don't know what this plague looked like, but it makes me think about the death angel. It does. Because how do you physically stand in front of a microscopic plague? You don't know if you are. Yet we know that He had to stand in between the living and the dead. Something to think about. Okay, so now we're done with all the really heavy stuff. Now we can get into fun stuff, like flowers on rods and things. Okay. Chapter 17 is all because of what? Chapter 16. And chapter 13. And chapter 12. And chapter 11. And just about all of Exodus. You know what I mean?
God establishing rule and judgment.
Right. And what it is it's this. Okay, you gotta take this mental picture. Okay, here's this mental picture. God is coming to the people of Israel, and He's going, "I've heard your cries. You're finally at that place. I can now take you under my wing, protect you, and you'll be my people, and I'll be your God." Isn't that what He says? Okay, so He takes these people, and then what happens?
Well, first of all, they
Mount
say
Sinai.
all you say we will do.
Well, okay.
Yeah, right.
At Mount Sinai, they make a statement, all you say we will do. Okay. Twice. They're at Mount Sinai. Then what happens? Moses goes up. They go, he's been gone for a long time. Because here's the other thing you got to think about. Do you think that Aaron made that cow in about a 12-hour span? Or do you think it took a couple of days at least? Yeah, threw it in the fire and it came out, right?
I jumped out.
There was a mold. Right. My wife, she studied metal jewelry design, okay? And baby, how long did it take to make a ring mold? A mold.
18, 20 hours.
18 to 20 hours just to make a ring mold. We know that this golden calf was big enough to see. And we know that it was something that was created by Aaron and out of gold. Do you think it took more than one day? Oh yeah. All right, so let's say it takes 2 days. That's it. Just 2 days. Okay, I'm just making this assumption. It takes 2 days. So then we work backwards. Here's the 40th day when Moses comes back. It took 2 days to make. How long did they have to decide on what the God looked like? I mean, because they probably wanted some input. Anybody, all right, let me rephrase this. I don't want this to sound bad, but women, if your man picks out a color for a room, is it ever right the first time? No. So we can all agree with that. And the thing is that there had to be some input put in to say, you know what, this calf, or this golden calf needs to probably have bigger ears. A little bit bigger tail, you know. We need to see it look like a calf. That looks like a donkey, Aaron. We need it to look like a calf. Okay. There was probably a couple of versions of drawings. Okay. I'm just thinking about building a house. Andrew and I, we build stuff. Okay. And how many plans did we go through just on this last job we had?
A lot.
A lot. We went through 7 versions of this plan that we are now finally at, that he still is making changes on. But that's besides the point. But it took 7 plans, right? 7 drawings. It took me 3 days to do each drawing. So there's 21 days. So let's just say that it was a week process to figure out what the calf was going to look like, right? All right, so there's 7 days plus the 2 to make it. All right, so now we're at 9 days, all right, before Moses comes back. Then we've got people that are going, well, what are we going to make this stupid calf out of? Do you think it took a little bit of time to get all the earrings and jewelry that it took to make the calf? Let's just say it took a day.
They probably formed a committee first.
Formed a committee first. Right, and that does take a while.
So it's
All right?
an engineering diagram.
Right, exactly. And we need to make sure that our smolting pot is big enough.
Open the bid for the manufacturer.
Sure, you know, I mean, you know, cheapest bid wins. Got to. And they're Jews too, so that makes sense. So, cheapest bid wins. But I'm making the point here of, okay, now we're at 10 days before Moses comes back down the mountain. How many days do you think it took for the entire congregation to get on board with this? Because I'm sorry, we have a small congregation here, and we can't all get on the same page when we're all in the room for 10 hours at a time. So you think it took more than 1 day? Or 2, maybe 3. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I've kind of got this picture in my head. Moses is gone for 5 days, and they all kind of go, well, we're lost. He's gone. What are we going to do?
He's left us out there to die. We don't know what happened to him.
So it took them 35 days to complete this stupid calf.
38 days would make more sense,
It would make more sense.
because they wandered around.
Oh,
for
true,
38
true.
years.
Yeah, well, you got to make the
You'll notice they
Paint
also
pictures.
killed her during this period,
okay.
They killed what?
because her is not mentioned again. And it was supposed to be Aaron and her take care of the situation while he was gone.
What about he? No,
Huh?
I'm just kidding. I know what you're saying. But I'm making that point though. Okay, so that happens as well. So we got to look at this and we got to go, okay. So they've just committed the ultimate commitment to God after hearing His voice, seeing they saw thunder.
Well,
They saw thunder.
they saw his glory.
And so they make this commitment, and it takes all of 5 days. Let's just say 5 days. 38's better, but